in this discovery of what a ripoff neoliberalism has been. And at some point, that's going to spread to the rest of Europe that is now going insolvent because its banks actually played a role in all of this. And it's going to spread to the United States when we go through here exactly what the post-communist countries are going about.
I'm speaking with financial economist and historian Dr. Michael Hudson. Today's show, The Way We Were and What We Are Becoming. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. You know, Dr. Hudson, when we last spoke, we spoke a bit about the IMF and the World Bank and about how countries were fed up with them and weren't taking out any more loans from them. And then I noticed, and this has been some time ago, that when the government of Iceland got into trouble, of course, I mean the whole economy there, that they went to the IMF and took out big loans, and that the IMF was charging them an 18% interest that would require them, of course, to cut down on social services, etc. So then I began to think, well, gee, is this global financial crisis going to put the IMF and the World Bank back into business?
This is their golden age. They've been waiting for this. They've gone into Iceland, and in order for Iceland to reach equilibrium, 50% of the population has to die within the next 5 years. Unless they die, unless you can increase disease, suicide, and immigration very rapidly, there will not be equilibrium. One of my best friends has gone to Iceland, who is Icelandic himself, has gone in to try to talk them out of this. But Icelanders have been told, will you please commit suicide in order to achieve financial equilibrium to pay the neoliberal bankers who pushed you into debt? And Iceland said, yes, we will commit suicide. We want to be good citizens. This is collective insanity. And it's insanity which essentially is the IMF neoliberal philosophy of stabilization. You know, people, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, were talking about Malthusian population growth as being a threat. You're now having a depopulation, just the opposite of medical progress and life extension. You're having almost all of the trends that people expected when I was growing up to be reversed right now, largely under IMF and World Bank guidance.
I notice now that the U.S. dollar is going up in value in relationship to other currencies. Now, how do you explain that?
The fact is that other currencies are in an even worse state than the United States. And in fact, the United States is the only real official money in the political sense of the word that can act as an international currency. They're now seeing that the euro is simply a satellite currency and is not really money. There isn't any euro as defined in money by the traditional definitions of money. And that is the basis of any country's money supply. What gives value to money is the ability of the government to tax the people, to pay. The United States is able to do that because we have a democratic system underlying our money supply, at least nominally. Europe doesn't have this. You know that the American Revolution was fought on the principle of no taxation without representation. You can't levy taxes without there being a parliament. Well, in this country, we have Congress and the Senate able to commit the country to pay its debts, and the value of money is its use to be paid in taxes. So people want to hold U.S. dollars because they have to pay taxes, basically, to the U.S. government. Europe doesn't have anything like that. Europe doesn't have a national parliament that can levy taxes. You have in Europe every individual country able to run up debts, but you don't have any European-wide debt, so there's no euro debt issued by the European community. That's why right now people are saying, well, gee, Greece is part of the euro, Spain is part of the euro. Are they going to have to depreciate their currencies because the euro may fall apart? And the euro really is sort of a mixture. It's sort of a currency union, but not an independent currency itself, so that the euro really can't serve as a vehicle for world central banks to hold their international reserves in, like they can hold in the form of the dollar. It's sort of a fictitious currency, and it was organized that way essentially because Europe began in the 1950s as a product of socialist idealism and anti-war idealism. The idea was for European integration, starting with the Schuman Plan for the European coal and steel community in 1952, followed by the Common Market in 1957, essentially to integrate Germany, France, the neighboring countries, the 7 countries, so that they would never again have military hostilities on continental Europe. Well, at that time, this was a social democratic policy, and you had all of the European countries, England, like America, also having progressive taxation. What you have today is just the opposite. Since about 1980, you've had European politics dominated by the banks, and the central banks have been made independent of the political process, and they call that democratic. Well, of course, it's not democratic when you make a central bank like the Federal Reserve in this country nominally independent of the political process, because the political process is supposed to be democratic. So what you have in Europe is essentially the European Union laws are extremely anti-labor. You have the European labor laws, social laws, and above all the financial system run by a neoliberal, anti-labor financial sector that essentially prevents, for instance, any country that is a member of the European community from running a budget deficit of more than 3% of gross domestic product. Well, you're having in America now, quite properly, the United States run a very large budget deficit. That's what countries do in recession. That's counter-cyclical Keynesian demand. Europe, according to its national laws, cannot run a counter-cyclical policy. It must run an extractive policy to shrink and shrink and shrink. So the European community has been turned into a chronic anti-labor deflationary policy to shrink Europe, and that's one of the reasons that Donald Rumsfeld referred so contemptuously to old Europe 2 years ago. Europe is dead. By not permitting its governments to run a budget deficit, it's guaranteed shrinking employment in the world market. The European trade has all of a sudden plummeted. Almost every chart you look at for Europe is a vertical line going straight down, and you're having very large-scale unemployment there. So far, it's the French who have been politically opposing the most, and yet it's the French economy that is the least strongly affected because they've been the least neoliberalized European economy. But given Europe's problems of so anti-labor, so anti-industrial, so pro-financial, that's why the euro is plunging. It's why the pound sterling is plunging. One of the few things that is keeping the euro and sterling afloat is that they are the recipients of about $1 trillion of all of this bailout money that has gone basically to pay off the neoliberal European and British banks that are on the winning side of the gambles with AIG and Citibank and the other large financial institutions here. But apart from the oligarchy there, the inequality that you're seeing in the United States and Canada of the bottom 20% of the population, the bottom 80%, the bottom 90% increasingly indebted to the top 10%, the same thing is happening in Europe, and that's why sterling and the euro are plunging against the dollar. They're even more insolvent, especially they're insolvent because now the chickens are coming home to roost on all of their bad loans to the post-Soviet states. So as the post-Soviet states go, they're dragging down Europe and England and making it even worse off than the United States, which at least has its debts denominated in its own currency.
So what do you consider the greatest problem facing us in this financial crisis? Is it the debt overhang, would you say?
I'd say the problem is that the people don't understand that the financial sector is not part of the real economy, that it can be cut off, that you don't have to bail out AIG. When you bail out AIG, you're really bailing out its counterparties, the speculators. You don't have to bail out casino capitalism. You have to save industrial capitalism, and you have to save labor. The fact that the American voters believe that the way to stabilize is to pay labor less and less to extract more and more of its income for Social Security, the fact that they don't understand that privatizing Social Security, as plans are now being rehashed for that, means that the government is going to put money into the stock market, and that will simply wipe out their savings, just as it's wiped out their pension fund savings, just as it's wiped out their 401ks, it's wiped out their own personal retirement accounts. Their personal retirement accounts are being wiped out in order to pay the top 1% of the population. Until they realize that the money that they're losing is being paid to the top 1%, there's not going to be an attempt to stop the bleeding. Right now, the bleeding is taking place, and so the real problem isn't simply that the bleeding's taking place, it's that the parasite has numbed the brain so that it doesn't even realize what's happening.
Is America a failed economy? Is the shift of planning from governments to the financial oligarchy irreversible?
Well, people 50 years ago were talking about speculating whether there was a convergence between the United States and Soviet Russia. And, for instance, Brzezinski did his first writing on the Technocratic Society, saying, yes, he expected there to be a convergence, and everybody expected the convergence to be a growing role of the state, a growing role of the state as planner and essentially the brains for the future. It turned out that there is a convergence, but it's along just the opposite lines of neoliberal lines of dismantling the state and turning what was supposed to be the state's job of doing the economic planning and mobilizing the economic surplus for social purposes, above all infrastructure investment. That's all passed into the financial sector. So the planners now of the American economy are not the government, they're the banks and the insurance companies. AIG and the Treasury are doing the planning, and the Treasury is doing the planning with the Federal Reserve on behalf of an extractive financial sector, not on behalf of American labor and American industrialization. So their idea of planning is to extract as much as they can from industry and living standards and give to themselves. And they will do it until there's a counter-pressure. And you're having exactly the same thing happen here that happened in Yeltsin under the kleptocrats, and advised by the American neoliberals, by Summers, by Rubenomics, and by Robert Rubin's protege, Geithner. The people who destroyed the post-Soviet economies are now doing exactly the same thing in America. So we're having an American convergence with Russia, and the convergence is going to entail shorter lifespans, lower birth rates, higher death rates, higher drug abuse, higher alcoholism, and an emigration of skilled labor, a brain drain, reversing the 3 centuries of American affluence, which basically was a flowing in of foreign capital and most of all labor into the United States. All of that's ending now. It's being reversed, and that's the neoliberal program. That's what happens when the government relinquishes economic planning and tax policy and investment policy. That's what happens when a democracy turns into oligarchy and kleptocracy.
I'm speaking with financial economist and historian Dr. Michael Hudson. Today's show, The Way We Were and What We Are Becoming. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Well, since this financial crisis that we're experiencing is global, where would this outflow be headed?
essentially into offshore banking centers, into tax evasion centers, into the Swiss banks, which are now being prosecuted for acting essentially as criminal enterprises. I would like to see the United States prosecute UBS and close it down as a criminal enterprise making money by evading taxes in the United States. It's been accused of helping 74,000 Americans evade taxes. Essentially, the Swiss banking system, like the offshore banking system, is an organized criminal enterprise, just as Arthur Andersen was, just as KPMG, the accounting firm, is. Essentially, the money's headed to any economy where the financial sector has replaced governments as the party in control. Much of the money will head out to England, which is reverting very quickly to neo-feudalism. Money may flow to Russia for safety, because Russia is a country where the kleptocrats are thoroughly in control. It can go to money laundering centers. It can go to the small Pacific islands like Nauru. It can go to